Hi there. Today we're going to be talking about solving equations with rational coefficients or rational numbers. Remember, the coefficient is that number in front of the variable. And so generally we've been looking at ones that are just simple whole numbers, but today we're going to be looking at ones that might be maybe a fraction, maybe like a 3/4 x, and solving with something like that in front of the variable. Again, it's a rational number, not irrational, so it's actually a real thing there. And so we're going to be able to work with that. To do today's work, you're going to have to be playing around a lot with decimals as well as with fractions when you're working these problems out. So you're going to have to be able to multiply and divide decimals and fractions. You're going to need to be able to convert fractions into decimals or decimals into fractions in order to work them out. And that'll probably be the trickiest thing here. It does say that we can basically multiply by the inverse or reciprocal so the product becomes 1 when solving these things. Again, like we said before, if I have 15 equal to 0.5n and I want to solve for n is the goal, I'm going to multiply both sides by 0.5. Or sorry, divide both sides by 0.5 because I want to get it separated. They're joined together by multiplication, so I'm going to separate by division. So you can see here in the example, we divide both sides by 0.5, keeping the equation balanced, right? What I do to one side, I do to the other, so it's nice and balanced there. And in doing that, it eliminates the 0.5 from this side of the equation, leaving us with just the n, and then we end up with 15 divided by 0.5. Again, a problem that you could check with a calculator if you wish. That's not a problem to check with a calculator, but we do want to make sure that you are able to solve a problem like that using long division and just without a calculator. So by all means, use a calculator to check your work. Just don't rely on that as being the only way of solving it, because you won't always have access to a calculator on some of your diagnostic tests or tests that you do this year. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And sometimes we're just checking to see, do you know how to do these basic computations, which are a carryover from maybe elementary school, later elementary school, and early junior high. Now for a problem like this next one, we can see we have 4/5 x equals 8. Again, it's what I want to do here is multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, so I have 4/5 by itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip that and multiply by 5/4 on each side. That becomes my reciprocal. And in doing so, we can see the 5's cancel out, the 4's cancel out, so I'm left with just basically 1x on this side equal to whatever this happens to be. And again, that's 5/4 times 8/1. And if you're doing that, you'd probably reduce that to 1/4 there, 2/4 there, and then multiply straight across for 10/1, or simply x equals 10, and you're set there. Let me do a couple examples here just so you have something to kind of look back and refer to when you look back later on when you're doing your homework. Okay, so for this first one, we see that the 0.7 is joined together by the m by multiplication. So I want to divide both sides by 0.7. So in this case here, the number on top gets to live in our house, 4.9 divided by 0.7. And this is the point where, again, use your calculator to check it out to see if you got it right, but make sure you know how to do this by hand. First thing I want to do is I want to move the decimal point over here. And if I move it on the outside, I need to move it also on the inside, and then move it up into my solution right there immediately right away. So I did one hop here, and put the decimal on top right away. So that means I can ignore the 0. So 7 goes into 4 0 times, 7 goes into 49 7 times, 7 times 7 is 49. We subtract and have 0 left over. So I'm left with nothing there after the decimal. We have simply the answer 7. So 7 equals m for my solution for that first one. Alright, let's look at a fraction one. Here I have -6/18 h equals -1/2. I want to multiply by the reciprocal. Now this is one where we know the reciprocal is going to be 18/6. But I want to make sure I include with that the negative sign. Okay? I'm going to include with the negative sign. So on this side of the equation, this means that all of this is going to go away, and a negative times a negative leaves me with a positive h on this side. That's why it's important to include the negative h when I multiply by the reciprocal, or the negative fraction when I multiply by the reciprocal, so that my variable becomes a positive. I don't want a negative h as my solution. Now moving over to this side, again, I need to do negative 18/6, the same one on this side of the equation, times what I already had, -1/2. Okay, so I can reduce on the diagonals. There's 1 2 in there, and there's 9 2's in there. I can also reduce on the vertical here, 9 and 6. I know that 3 goes in here 2 times, and 3 goes in here 3 times. So I'm left with a negative times a negative, which means I'm going to have a positive solution. Just keep that there to remember that. And 3 times 1 is 3, and 2 times 1 is 2. So I have 3/2 equals h, or another way of writing that down as a mixed number, it's 1.5 equals h. So I am working with fractions here. Sometimes what kids do is they'll use their calculators and they'll convert this into a decimal and then have this crazy answer. You don't need all that. So use the fractions. Again, fractions are 1/3 of your friend because of the f and the r. All right, let's do another one here. For this one here, we're going to divide both sides by 4. Pretty straightforward. So we have a 2.8 divided by 4. Put my decimal point on top right away so I don't forget about that. 4 goes into 2 0 times. 4 goes into 28 7 times with nothing left over. So we would say that 0.7 or 0.7 equals b in that case there. Number 4, another one with a fraction. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So if I have 3/5 x equals 12, I'm going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, 5/3. Remember, 12 is actually 12 over 1. So that becomes 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, leaving us with just x on this side, equal to whatever that's going to be. I can reduce in the diagonals, 1 3 in there, 4 3's in there. 4 times 5 is 20, over 1, we just leave it as 20. So that's multiplying by the reciprocal. Again, this one, same idea. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is going to be 3/10 times 16 over 1 is going to equal a. And again, I can put the 3/10 over here, but it immediately crosses out. And so you can see the more you do this, the more you go, I'm keeping it balanced, but I'm keeping it balanced in my head. All right, so again, that's just with some practice and time. So there are 5 2's in there, there are 8 2's in there, nothing else I can reduce. This becomes 3 times 8 is 24 over 5 equals a, and I would rewrite that. 5 goes in there 4 times. 4 times 5 is 20, so 24 minus 20 is 4 left over. So I have 4 and 4/5 equals a. Okay, so you get the idea there. We have some decimal examples I've gone over, and I've gone over 3 different fractional examples there. Just be careful with your signs as you do it, and the goal is always to make sure your variable ends up being a positive variable. So make sure that you're not having a negative variable in your solution. The answer can be negative. Do we have any of those? I don't see any of those here. They're all positive numbers, but your answer can certainly be negative. Just make sure your variable is positive, okay? You always want your variable to be a positive number. Okay, and there's a way to do that too. If you do end up somehow having a negative variable, then again multiply both sides by -1, and that will make make the variable positive after that, and then it'll change the signs on the other side too. Okay, gonna pause there, let you do your homework. We'll come back and check those together in just a moment. Alright, let's go over some of your homework problems today. Solving equations with rational numbers. Some of these are some simple addition, subtraction. Others are going to be multiplying, division. We'll see how that works out. So first of all, we have m plus 0.88 equals 1.64. So that's a plus, so we're going to subtract 0.88 from both sides. And that goes away, and we're left over here with m equals whatever that's going to be. So 4 minus 8, I have to borrow. So 14 minus 8 is 6. 5 I have to borrow, so 15 minus 8 is 7. Bring down the decimal, so m equals 0.76. Over here, to get the d by itself, I'm going to add 5/6 to both sides. I'm going to add 5/6, add 5/6, and that's going to give us what d is equal to. I definitely need more space for this one, so I'm going to use the space over here. So d is going to be equal to -3/5 plus 5/6. In order to add those up, I need to have a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply both sides, this side by 5 over 5. I'm just writing the wrong numbers here. Multiply this side by 5 over 5, which is 1. I'll multiply this side by 6 over 6, which is 1. And that gives me on the top a negative 6 times 3 is 18, so a negative 18 over 30 plus 5 times 5 is 25 over 30. And now I can do some just regular arithmetic. 25 minus 18 is going to be 7. The denominator stays the same, and that's going to be equal to D. So again, a simple problem, but you have to be able to work with fractions and do it correctly to make sure you end up with the correct solution. So 7/30 equals D. Number 5, h minus a negative 1/3 equals 8.2. Remember, for this we're going to add the inverse. So we have that there. So get that to become a plus problem. Okay, right away. Now I'm going to subtract 6.3 from both sides. Be careful that you line up your columns properly when you're doing subtraction. That goes away, and h is going to be equal to 2 minus 0 is 2. I can't do 1 minus 3, so I need to borrow. So 11 minus 3 is 8. Bring down the decimal. 7 minus 6 is 1. And h is equal to 1.82. Alright, number 7. A little bit more like our kind of lesson today. We want to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply this side by negative 8 over 5. And in doing that, I know that there's 1 5 in there, and there's 5 5s in there. Now I can multiply straight across. 5 times 8 is 40. Positive times a negative is a negative. The 1 is simply 1. So I'm left with k equals negative 40. On this one, we're going to divide by negative 0.42. Divide by negative 0.42. Okay, we know that's going to be eliminated, so our answer is going to be a equals whatever this happens to be. It's a negative divided by a negative, so I know I'm going to have a positive solution. So let me go ahead and do that then. We have 2.94 divided by 0.42. I'm not going to worry about the signs anymore because I know that these become positive because a negative and a negative is positive. First thing I need to do is move my decimal over 2 spots, move it over 2 spots, and put it up there right away. 42 goes into 2 0 times, 29 0 times, into 294. I have no idea how many times. I know that 4 times 7 is 28, so I know that 4 times 7 is 28. So I'm going to try a 7 to start with. 7 times 2 is 14, carry the 1. 7 times 4 is 28 plus 1 is 29. That worked out splendidly. So we're going to say that A equals 7 right there. All right, number 11. I have f divided by 2.4 equals that. So to get it by itself, what I want to do is multiply by the reciprocal. Well, in this case here, I'm going to multiply this side by 2.4 and multiply this side by 2.4. Because that becomes 2.4 over 1, cancel, cancel. So f is simply equal to this times this. I'm going to write 2.4 right there, do my math. 5 times 4 is 20. 7 times 4 is 28, plus 2 is 30. Start with a 0. 5 times 2 is 10, carry the 1. 14 plus 1 is 15. So I have 0, 0, 8, and 1, and I have 2 digits behind the decimal. All right, and so I have 18 is my answer down there, hard to read, so I move it over 2 spaces. So f is equal to 18. All right, fantastic. Number 13, this one's one of the crazy ones here, right? Because I have a decimal and I have a fraction number there, so I have to work that out for how am I going to do that there. Well, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to divide both sides. To get this apart, I want to divide by 2.5. Okay? So I can think about this being divided by 2.5 to make that go away. But now over here I end up with negative 13/16 divided by 2.5. And this is where it starts to get a little cumbersome because, well, what does that actually mean? Well, what we can do is a couple things. We can take the 2.5 and we can convert that into a fraction. So that becomes negative 13/16 divided by 2, and 0.5 is a half, 2.5. Still can't divide it quite yet. So let me go ahead and turn this into an improper. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So I have negative 13/16 divided by 5 over 2. When we're dividing fractions, we're going to flip the second and multiply. So we have negative 13 over 16 times 2 over 5. I can reduce that to 1 and 8, nothing else to reduce. So I end up with negative 13 over 40 is going to be equal to x. So a little bit crazy right there, but that does work out as far as I can tell. Again, if you use a calculator, who knows what answer you're going to get, but that's a long way of doing that. That's probably the most complicated it really gets. For 15, we have this repeating decimal, is what this line means, so it's 0.3333. One thing you may or may not know is that when you have this repeating decimal, the way that works, what that is that is often simply negative 1 1/3. Because if you do a calculator and you do 1 divided by 3, what's going to happen is it's going to say 0.3 forever. It just goes on. So I'm going to convert this right away into a fraction. Okay? So what I really have is 8 2/3 equals negative 1 1/3 g. I'm going to write both of these as an improper. So we have 26 over 3 equals negative, 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4, 4/3 g. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal now, negative 3/4. Okay, so reciprocal, so that is eliminated. So on this side I just have g, and over here 3 is reduced to 1, and then 4 doesn't go into 26, so I'm just going to leave it like that, 26 over 4. But remember, it was a negative times a positive. Now for this one I can reduce. 4 goes into 26 6 times with 2 left over. Or another way of saying it is negative 6.5 equals g. So again, lots of steps, a little nicer because I could convert that into a fraction right away, and that works out great, and it just kind of balanced out pretty quickly. All right, that's really it for the day. Hope you had a good lesson and a good day, and we'll see you next time.